And now it is my joy to introduce Dr. Michael Dillbeck. Dr. Dillbeck was honored as a U.S. Presidential Scholar in 1968 by President Lyndon Johnson. He received his Ph.D. degree in psychology in 1976 from Purdue University in Indiana, USA. He is a research professor and trustee of Maharishi University of Management, USA, and an international administrator of the Global Country of World Peace. He has published extensive research on the physiological, psychological, and sociological effects of Maharishi's Vedic technology of consciousness. He is the senior editor of scientific research on the Transcendental Meditation and TM program collected papers, volumes 5, 6, and 7, in which scientific papers are reprinted from the academic journals. With his balanced intellect and heart, Dr. Dillbeck is a friend to all. Please welcome him.
Thank you for that unbiased introduction. Your Holiness Shankaracharya Ji, other revered Vedic experts, honorable delegates and guests, when His Holiness Maharishi Mahesh Yogi brought the practice of Transcendental Meditation to the world from the Vedic tradition in the 1950s, he said something that was very unexpected about meditation. Although meditation had been associated with withdrawal from the world, Maharishi said that if we want a life that is practical and successful in the world, then transcending through meditation is essential. And now, more than 50 years later, this statement has been confirmed by over 600 scientific research papers authored by researchers at more than 250 universities. These studies document the holistic benefits for all areas of life of Maharishi's Vedic technology of consciousness. The studies show that this technology, the Transcendental Meditation and TM program, is a technology for the development of human potential. At the same time, this research confirms two of the fundamental principles of the Vedic wisdom that indicate why consciousness is always primary in Vedic India. Those principles are, first, transcendental consciousness, that is, consciousness in its pure or transcendental state, is the basis of all aspects of life. And secondly, that transcendental consciousness is universal in its nature. We'll come back to these two principles after seeing some results of research on the Transcendental Meditation technique. What I will be doing in this presentation is reviewing a few sample studies that indicate some of the physiological, psychological, and sociological benefits, effects of Maharishi's Vedic technology, the Transcendental Meditation and TM program. Other speakers will go into specific areas to point out how this body of research offers great fulfillment for areas such as education, healthcare, culture, defense, and administration. So first, physiology. What physiological research shows is that during the process of transcending in Transcendental Meditation, the body and mind experience a unique state of restful alertness. For example, this chart shows what is called a meta-analysis, which combines the results of many studies into one in order to make very strong conclusions. Here we see deep physiological restfulness during Transcendental Meditation in comparison to usual rest with eyes closed. And this was measured by, on the left, reduced respiration rate, in the middle, reduced skin conductance, that is a measure of reduced activation in the physiology, and reduced, on the right, reduced blood lactate, which is the biochemical indicator suggesting reduced adrenaline or increased calmness. At the same time, while the body enjoys a deep state of rest, the mind is very alert. This early study shows increased wakefulness in comparison to eyes closed rest, as measured by the electroencephalogram, or EEG. We'll hear more detail about the EEG from Dr. Travis on Sunday. As a result of regular practice, regular experience of transcendental consciousness, this state of restful alertness is increasingly stabilized in daily life. This is experienced as greater silence and stability in the dynamism of life, with important consequences for maintaining good health. For example, here is another meta-analysis published in the American Journal of Hypertension that summarized the results of all randomized control trials on the effects of transcendental meditation on high blood pressure. Compared to controls, what we see here is that there is a significant decline in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure after a few months of practice. So it's such results, as we've heard earlier, that led the American Heart Association to endorse transcendental meditation for reducing high blood pressure, as you'll hear in more detail from Dr. Wallace and Dr. Schneider tomorrow. The inner calmness and stability of body and mind that come from regular practice also leads spontaneously to more health-promoting behavior. For example, another meta-analysis of all studies on transcendental meditation related to smoking found that just naturally there was a greater reduction of cigarette use than for standard treatment and prevention programs in the two left bars. Even though such changes in behavior are not required to learn the practice of transcendental meditation, the individual just becomes more sensitive to avoid any behavior that creates imbalance in mind and body. The same result is found for alcohol consumption, which was seen here. These natural changes in behavior have enormous implications for promoting health in the whole population, since tobacco and alcohol consumption are among the primary causes of preventable death.
Yeah, sure.
These are examples of physiologically related effects of the changes that naturally occur in the body as one transcends or experiences samadhi. Yeah. Just as the growth of restful alertness or silence in the dynamism is seen in the body, is also seen on the psychological level in the growth of creative intelligence, of inner stability, and more effective action. These are natural expressions of the development of consciousness found in the Vedic description of enlightenment, which result from stabilizing the experience of samadhi. For example, this study shows development of abstract intelligence among university students practicing transcendental meditation in contrast to non-meditating controls. This is very important because, as we see in the control group, this abstract intelligence usually stops developing after adolescence. Here we see the practical value of growing clarity of mind. Increased graduation rate was found in secondary school students who learn transcendental meditation in comparison to control students who were matched on the basis of their prior academic performance. Growth of inner stability can be seen in terms of increased emotional stability as well, in terms of decreased anxiety and depression. For example, this chart shows another meta-analysis of about 150 outcomes, indicating that the process of transcending or effortlessly experiencing samadhi has a much greater effect of reducing anxiety in comparison to practices of concentration or contemplation or to other techniques. In the governmental sector, employees of a high security governmental agency show decreased depression after learning transcendental meditation in comparison to control employees who participated in a stress management program. And as we see here, this reduced depression was still evident in a follow-up measurement 3 years later, where we see that the controls, unfortunately, became more depressed in their government jobs. Also, increased effectiveness in activity is measured among professionals who learn the practice. For example, this longitudinal study of managers in a medical equipment company in the United States found that those who learned the practice compared to matched controls were judged by others in the company as making a greater contribution to the organization. And this study of executives and workers in the automotive industry in the United States extends these results to social behavior, where they showed improved work and personal relationships in comparison to controls from the same work sites. So we have seen briefly that the growth of higher consciousness resulting from increased stabilization of pure consciousness or samadhi results from the practice of transcendental meditation. And we see this expressed physiologically in the development of the individual's health and psychologically in the growth of creative intelligence, inner stability, and effectiveness in action. Now, just from these few results we've seen so far, it's clear that the experience of samadhi is for everyone. Students, business people, civil servants, and with profound practical benefits. And we can also see from the greater balance in physiology and from the concrete psychological developments for the mind, emotions, and behavior that the Vedic description is correct, that transcendental consciousness, the experience of Atma, is the basis of all other aspects of life, the basis of health, mind, emotional stability, behavior, and relationships with others. And now we'll go one step further and see how research confirms the Vedic description that transcendental consciousness is universal in its nature, that my Atma and your Atma and the Atma of everyone is the same. So another way of saying this in the language of modern science, as we've heard this morning, is that transcendental consciousness has the property of a field, in fact, the most fundamental field of nature. Now, this field property of consciousness has been very rigorously tested now for about 40 years. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi predicted that even a small group stimulating or enlivening this field of transcendental consciousness through the group practice of the advanced TM City program, including yogic flying, would radiate an influence of coherence and harmony, or we could say an influence of sattva, that would be experienced by everyone in society. It's like when the tide comes in, all the boats in the harbor, they rise up together. And the size of this group of yogic flyers practicing together that is required to create this effect is very small, the square root of 1% of the population to create coherence and harmony in society. So for a city of 1 million, the square root of 1% is a group of 100 people. For the whole population of India, the size of the group needed, the square root of 1% of the population, is about 3,600. And for the whole world's current population, a group of 8,600 is needed. Now that means that from one place, an influence of peace and harmony, an influence of sattva, can be created in a city, a country, or the world as a whole. There have been many studies verifying this effect at the city-state, national, and international levels. Some of these studies involve temporarily bringing together a group of experts to practice together in one place. For example, this chart shows that on occasions when a group of TMCD experts were brought into 3 national capital districts, the crime went down. On the left, here in the Union Territory of Delhi in 1980-1981, in the middle in Metro Manila, Philippines in 1983-1984, and on the right in Washington, D.C. in 1993. The effect in Washington, D.C. was larger because a much bigger group was assembled. Now, all the studies on this effect, called the Maharshi effect in the scientific literature, use the most rigorous statistical procedures available in the social sciences. Other studies have examined a stable group, just to see what happens when the group reaches the threshold of the score of 1%. For example, at Maharshi University of Management in the United States, there's a stable group of students, faculty, administrators, and community members, which many times over the past 30 years has reached the threshold required for the U.S. population. And as we see in this chart, on the left side, during the specific weeks when the size of this group was large enough to predict an influence for the U.S., there was a drop in violence in the whole country as measured by the total of reduced homicides, suicides, and traffic fatalities. And as shown on the right, the same effect was seen in Canada when the size of this group reached the threshold for the combined population of the US and Canada. Now, I should mention that starting in late 2006, in order again to help reach the required threshold for the United States, a group of Maharshi Vedic pundits from India were brought to Maharshi University of Management campus to practice the TM City program with yogic flying each morning and evening, as well as to perform daily Rudra Abhishek. With the help of these Vedic pundits, the size of the TM City group quickly reached the required number in January of 2007 and remained above this threshold almost all the time through 2010. And we gathered data over this period and farther into the past. The most recent data we could gather at the time was 2010. And although these findings are just being now submitted to journals, I want to give you a sense of the holistic improvement in national life that was created. Here on the right side of the vertical line, is the reduced trend of violent crime rate in the major cities of the nation, statistically very significant. Here we see a parallel significant reduction in the national homicide rate in the country. And here we see, identically almost, a statistically significant reduction in the national infant mortality rate. There was also a significant reduction in fatality rate due to motor vehicle accidents and reduction in the trends of death due to drugs, including prescribed medical drugs. Remarkably, all these improvements in the U.S. started to change simultaneously in January of 2007, when the size of the group reached the critical threshold. So the world owes a great debt of thanks to India for the gift of this very precious Vedic technology, and also the U.S. owes an additional debt of thanks to India for the Vedic Pandit visitors successfully helping to create sattva in the nation. This increased sattva has been shown to create an influence of peace even in conflict areas. For example, during the civil conflict in Lebanon in the 1980s, there were 7 periods in which groups of TM City yogic flyers were assembled at various locations in Lebanon, in Israel, and mostly at more distant locations that were nevertheless large enough in principle to create this effect in Lebanon. And during these periods, the periods of these assemblies, as indicated here by content analysis of a wide range of news sources by an independent Lebanese radar, there was a large and highly significant reduction, over 50%, in the degree of conflict the number of war fatalities, and the number of war injuries during those specific 7 periods compared to all other times in a more than 2-year period. Finally, on 3 occasions of several weeks each, the size of a temporary assembly of yogic flyers has reached the required number for the whole world's population. And here we see the reduction during those periods in worldwide international conflict, and also a 72% reduction in fatalities and injuries due to international terrorism during those 3 periods taken together, compared to all other times during a 3-year period. So in summary, we have glimpsed the large body of research showing that the effortless technology of experiencing transcendental consciousness, the Vedic technology of consciousness, is holistically enriching to both the individual and society, with profound benefits for education, health, business, government, and other areas of living. And this research confirms the description of the Vedic literature that transcendental consciousness is the basis of all aspects of life and is universal to every individual. And on that basis, Vasudev Kutumbakam, the world is our family. Thank you very much, Jai Gurudev.